Welcome to Sinister States.
The first thing you notice when you start working solo night shifts at an isolated wind farm isn't the silence. It's the scale. 36 turbines stretched across a ridge line miles from the nearest town, each one tall enough to dwarf a skyscraper downtown. Each one turning slow and deliberate against the sky, like it has all the time in the world. During the day, they look almost graceful. White towers against blue air. Clean energy. Progress. At night, they are something else entirely. I learned that 3 months into the job, on a shift that began like every other and ended in a way I still haven't written down in any official report. My name is Aaron Kessler. I'm a maintenance technician contracted to monitor and repair the Coldridge Wind Facility, 2 hours outside of any place you would call civilization. On paper, it's simple work. Monitor turbine output, respond to alarms, climb when needed, log findings, go home at dawn. In reality, you spend 12 hours alone in a trailer full of humming equipment while 36 machines breathe in the dark around you. Most nights are routine. System checks, minor resets, occasional sensor recalibration. The wind carries across the hills in long, steady currents, and the turbines answer with a low mechanical exhale that becomes background noise if you let it. That night started with wind speeds hovering around 20 miles per hour, ideal generation conditions. All turbines were active and synchronized. Output steady. Grid feed normal. I remember checking the horizon at 1845 as the last of the daylight drained behind the hills. The red aviation lights blinked on in unison, marking each tower like a warning to aircraft that would never fly this low. I've always thought those lights made the farm look like a row of giant, patient eyes. At 1912, Turbine 12 flagged a minor communication latency. Not an error, just a hiccup in the SCADA system. The kind of thing you log and monitor. I marked it and continued my sweep. By 2003, the latency had cleared. No further issues. At 2047, the camera feed from 12 flickered for less than a second. The system didn't flag it. I only noticed because I was watching the multicam display when it happened. The image stuttered and returned, still aimed at the tower base and surrounding field. I leaned closer to the monitor. Grainy night vision. The base door was closed. The gravel lot empty. Tree line still. I chalked it up to signal interference. Wind farms sit in electromagnetic soup half the time. At 21:27, Turbine 12 shut itself down. The alarm tone cut through the trailer sharp and immediate. Critical vibration spike. Automatic brake engaged. Rotor locked. I straightened in my chair. Vibration spikes can mean anything from a loose sensor to gearbox failure. Worst case, structural compromise. Best case, a faulty reading. I pulled up the diagnostics. The spike had lasted less than 3 seconds, but peaked high enough to trigger the failsafe. Wind speed hadn't changed. No lightning in the area. No seismic activity logged regionally. I radioed the regional dispatcher. Coldridge to grid. Turbine 12 offline. Investigating. Static answered first, longer than usual. Then the dispatcher's voice, faint and distant. Copy, Coldridge. Keep us posted. The connection felt stretched thin. I grabbed my gear, helmet, harness, headlamp, toolkit, and stepped outside. The temperature had dropped fast after sunset. Wind pushed across the ridge in steady gusts, carrying the low synchronized hum of 35 active turbines. One stood still now. Turbine 12's blades were locked mid-rotation, one pointing down like a compass needle aimed at the earth. Its red aviation light, though, was not blinking. It was glowing steady. I stopped halfway to the truck and stared. The lights are wired to blink at uniform intervals. It's a federal requirement. Steady illumination only happens during manual override or malfunction. The SCADA hadn't shown an aviation light fault. Yet there it was, constant and unwavering. I climbed into the truck and drove the gravel path out to 12. The tires crunched loud in the otherwise open night. As I approached, the scale of the stopped blades made the tower feel heavier, as if the lack of motion gave it more presence. I parked near the base and killed the engine. The wind filled the sudden silence with a hollow rush around the tower. I stepped out and looked up. The steady red light bathed the nacelle in a faint glow. No flicker, no blink, just constant. I keep my radio. Dispatch, confirming 12 aviation lights stuck on steady. You showing that? Static again. Then my own voice came back at me, delayed and warped. Showing that. I lowered the radio slowly. The field around me seemed to absorb the sound. I tried again. Dispatch, do you copy? Nothing. The other turbines continued their steady rotation, red lights blinking in perfect rhythm. Only 12 remained constant, like it was holding its breath. I approached the base door and unlocked it. The interior smelled like oil and metal, and something else faintly sharp, like overheated wiring. I stepped inside and shut the door against the wind. The echo of it closing reverberated up the hollow shaft. I switched on my headlamp and looked up the vertical ladder disappearing into darkness. The tapping started then. Soft at first. A metallic tick somewhere above. I froze, listening. Tap. A pause. Then two in quick succession. Tap, tap. The sound carried down the interior, like someone lightly striking the tower wall with a wrench. I told myself it was thermal contraction. Metal shifts when temperature drops. I'd heard similar noises before, but never in a pattern. I waited. Silence returned. I climbed. Each rung felt colder than it should have. My boots echoed with hollow resonance. At 20 feet, I heard it again. Tap. This time directly overhead. I kept climbing. At 40 feet, the tapping matched my rhythm, almost synchronized to the pull of my hands. I stopped abruptly. The tapping stopped too. My pulse thudded in my ears. I resumed climbing. The tapping resumed. Slow. Patient. I reached the first platform and clipped into rest. The sound moved above me, circling the inner curve of the tower. Not random expansion. Not settling metal. Movement. I swallowed and continued upward toward the nacelle hatch. By the time I reached it, my gloves were damp inside from sweat despite the cold. I pushed the hatch open and pulled myself into the nacelle housing. Emergency lights cast dim strips along the floor panels. The gearbox loomed massive and silent. The generator casing reflected faint red light bleeding through the ventilation slats. The tapping came from behind the generator. 3 quick strikes. Then 1. I moved slowly around the machinery, sweeping my headlamp beam across cables and hydraulic lines. At the far end of the narrow corridor, near the rear access panel, something stood where nothing should be. Tall, bent at the top, darker than the surrounding dark. My brain tried to flatten it into shadow, but the edges remained solid under the beam. It did not move like a person. It unfolded, slowly, upward, until the top brushed the interior ceiling. My headlamp flickered once. When it stabilized, the space was empty. The tapping stopped. The red aviation light outside resumed blinking in perfect sync with the rest of the farm. My radio crackled with a fragment of distorted audio that might have been my own voice. I stood there in the humless nacelle, breathing hard, and understood something with a clarity that felt colder than the wind outside. The turbines do not make the night quieter. They make it aware. The hours that followed stretched like a rubber band pulled beyond its limits. I stayed in the nacelle, inspecting every panel, every sensor, every wire that could possibly explain the anomaly. Nothing. Everything read nominal, except the subtle vibrations I could feel under my boots, low-frequency hums that didn't match the turbine's usual rhythm. My hands hovered over the control panel, fingers brushing switches I didn't dare flick. Every time I glanced at the entrance, the shadows seemed to stretch farther into the room. The wind outside moaned against the tower, carrying the distant hum of other turbines. But Turbine 12 stood apart. It wasn't silent. It was patient, a presence without motion. Around 23:15, I attempted another SCADA check. The screen flashed. Communication error. Not a latency. Not a minor glitch. A complete disconnect from the central system. I tried to reset the connection. Nothing. I radioed the dispatcher. Coldridge to grid. Turbine 12 SCADA offline. Requesting immediate technical support. Static again. The crackle seemed layered, as though something was filtering my voice before it reached the other side. My stomach twisted. I considered descending the tower. Step by step, back into the wind, away from whatever had manifested inside. But something anchored me. Protocol. If the system remained offline, it could trigger a cascade shutdown across the farm. I had to stay. I checked my watch. 23:42. Night deepened. The red lights outside pulsed in rhythm with a slow, steady breeze. Then the first sound came again, the tapping. 3 distinct knocks from somewhere above the generator casing. I froze. My flashlight caught the edge of the shadow. Not the same as before. This time it moved. Not humanly. Not animal. Something that obeyed different rules. It slithered along the wall's inner curvature, elongating, compressing, almost liquid in movement. I wanted to call out, to warn it I was there. My throat closed. The tapping came in a pattern now, deliberate, like a message I wasn't meant to understand. Tap, tap, pause, tap, 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 pause. I counted. 12 beats. 12. My pulse quickened. 12 turbines, 12 beats, a code I didn't yet know. I backed away, slowly, eyes tracking its movements as it disappeared behind hydraulic panels, only to re-emerge near the ceiling above the gearbox. The red aviation light outside flickered briefly, then returned to its usual rhythm. I realized the anomaly inside mirrored the one outside. The steady illumination, the dissonance. A synchronization. Not mechanical. Conscious. I whispered to myself, this isn't normal. I checked the panel displays again. All systems read fine, except the turbine shaft's rotational sensors. They were fluctuating subtly, readings inconsistent with a stationary rotor. It was as if the blades were moving in a dimension beyond the observable, spinning somewhere I couldn't perceive. I tried to shake the thought off, telling myself it was a sensor error. I wasn't convinced. Around 0:03, I decided to inspect the rear panel of the nacelle. I removed the access screws carefully, my gloved hands trembling slightly. Inside, cables were arranged as expected, neat bundles with no signs of tampering. But the air felt different. Thicker. The smell shifted to something sharp, metallic, like ozone combined with rust, and something older, organic. I froze mid-reach. Something shifted behind the panel. A faint scraping, soft but deliberate. My flashlight beam caught a reflection, a metallic glint. Not from my tools. Not from the existing machinery. It moved with purpose. I stumbled backward. Tap tap. The pattern resumed. It wasn't random. Every tap aligned with the oscillation I felt through the floor. I realized then that the turbine itself was listening, responding. A thought that felt insane, but no other explanation fit. The air vibrated subtly, and the shadow reappeared. Taller now. I could trace its shape along the wall with the flashlight. Elongated, limbs stretching unnaturally, bending along angles impossible for human joints. I tried to speak, but no sound emerged. The tapping stopped abruptly. Silence returned. Total, oppressive, aware silence. I moved toward the ladder to descend, thinking the ground would offer some reprieve. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the tower itself warped sound. I reached the base hatch and hesitated. The red light above was still blinking in perfect synchronization with the other turbines, but the steady illumination from before had returned for just a second, then gone. I climbed down, each rung now seeming longer than before, the metal cold and slick under my gloves. The wind outside howled through the ridge, carrying the distant hum, and when I stepped onto the gravel, the sound of 36 turbines seemed distorted. Unearthly, like voices humming beneath the mechanical drone. I ran to the trailer, keys clanging in my pocket. I needed to log what I'd seen, call backup, anything. But the radio refused. Static only. I punched the keypad frantically. Nothing. The trailer's lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then stabilized. My laptop refused to boot. SCADA terminals dead. Monitors blank. All systems offline. A deep unease settled over me. The isolation became a physical weight. No contact. 36 turbines surrounding me like silent watchers. At 0:27, the first report of an anomaly outside the perimeter came through my mind. I don't know why I thought of it. Maybe instinct. The turbines weren't just machines tonight. They were aware, or the presence I'd glimpsed had extended beyond the nacelle. I grabbed a flashlight and walked toward the nearest active turbine. The wind whipped around me. Its blades rotated normally, red lights blinking. But the hum, it carried a pattern. Tap, tap, tap. Not the turbine. Something in the rhythm. My skin prickled. The ground beneath me seemed uneven. I glanced around. Shadows shifted unnaturally along the gravel, long shapes stretching across the farm as if the turbines themselves were casting them. I considered retreat, but then the tapping came closer. One step, then another. Footsteps. I spun. Nothing. The turbines loomed. Steady red eyes blinking in unison. Tap, tap, tap. I ran back toward the trailer. Something skidded across gravel behind me, faint but deliberate. A scraping sound. I didn't look, just ran. Inside the trailer, I locked the door. My breath ragged. The SCADA terminal flickered to life for half a second. A message flashed, system override. I froze. The words remained for a heartbeat, then disappeared. Nothing else. The wind outside intensified, carrying a low vibration that resonated through the trailer floor. I tried the radio again. Static. I whispered into the microphone. Anyone. Please. Anyone copy. Silence. Then the tapping returned. From the roof. Slow, methodical, synchronized with the hum of the turbines. My headlamp illuminated nothing outside. The ridge was empty, yet the rhythm persisted. My pulse hammered in my chest. Tap, tap, tap. I realized the tapping had a cadence, a message, a countdown. I could feel it in my bones, syncing with the low-frequency vibrations beneath my feet. I crouched, trying to make sense. Every instinct screamed to run, but escape wasn't an option. The wind farm was a vast expanse. I was alone. The presence had extended its domain. My eyes darted to the nearest security monitor. It flickered. A figure appeared for a split second, tall, elongated, limbs impossible, then gone. Tap, tap, tap. My brain refused to process it as real. I thought of the turbines again. 36 towers, each with a red eye blinking, the 12th holding steady. Presence. Awareness. I realized, too late, that the night had changed the rules. Machines and shadows weren't separate. They weren't neutral. They were observers, participants. My thoughts raced. Any sound outside, the wind, the hum, even my own breathing, was amplified, twisted. Tap, tap, tap. I counted 12 beats again. The pattern repeated. A sequence. Something calculated. Something watching. I knew I had to act. I grabbed the emergency flashlight and headed toward Turbine 12. The shadow coiled inside, taller than the nacelle, bending, elongating. Tap, tap, tap. My hand hovered over the latch. I swallowed. I had no plan. Only action. Only moving forward into the unknown that I twisted the latch slowly, half expecting it to resist, to lock itself against me. The door creaked as it opened, and the turbine's interior greeted me with the same oppressive stillness I'd felt before. The hum of the machinery was uneven now, vibrating through the floor and walls in unpredictable pulses. The shadow moved above, fluid, liminal, twisting in ways no human body could. My flashlight caught glimpses of it as it shifted along the nacelle's ceiling, elongated limbs, a torso that bent without joints, head tilting at impossible angles. My hands shook as I moved deeper inside. Tap, tap, tap. The pattern continued, faster, almost urgent. My pulse synced to the rhythm without my consent. The turbines outside, 36 of them, seemed to respond in kind, a low vibration under the gravel, their lights pulsing in time with the tapping. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it or if some unnatural intelligence had commandeered the entire wind farm. I approached the control panel, fingers brushing buttons and switches, hoping to regain SCADA access. Nothing. The screens flickered, then went blank. Tap, tap, tap. The sound was now behind me. I spun around. The shadow coalesced into a shape that seemed almost humanoid, yet wrong. Its head tilted sideways, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw a grin too wide, teeth too even, like something out of a nightmare. It lunged. My flashlight swung wildly. I stumbled backward, hitting the generator housing. Sparks flew as the beam of my flashlight caught its eyes, pupils too large, reflecting red light, following me with impossible precision. Tap, tap, tap. It circled me, moving faster than my mind could track. I tried shouting, my voice cracking. Stay back. Stay away. Silence answered. The tapping was all I heard. I backed toward the ladder leading down. Every step on the metal rungs reverberated unnaturally, as if the tower itself was amplifying sound. The shadow lunged again, claws scraping against metal. I scrambled down, heart hammering. When my boots hit the gravel outside, I ran without looking back. The turbines hummed in response, each beat aligning with the tap, tap, tap I now recognized as a code. I reached the trailer, slammed the door, and pressed myself against it, gasping. The emergency radio still emitted only static. Tap, tap, tap. It was outside now, moving along the turbine bases, searching. I couldn't see it, couldn't hear it except for the tapping, echoing against the wind, against the turbines, against my skull. My laptop booted briefly, flickering to life for a few seconds before the screens went black again. The words "system override" appeared again and vanished. I grabbed my flashlight, planning to leave the area, to get as far as possible from Turbine 12, but the wind intensified suddenly, whipping my hair, carrying a low-frequency hum that seemed to vibrate through my chest. Shadows stretched and compressed across the gravel, as if the turbines themselves had grown appendages. Tap, tap, tap. 12 beats. 12 turbines. A message, a warning, or a countdown. I ran toward the service road, eyes scanning for anything at all. Then I saw a movement at the edge of my flashlight's beam, a figure, indistinct, shifting, blending with the turbine towers. Tap, tap, tap. Closer now. Faster. My breath caught in my throat. I ducked behind a small service shed. The wind tore at the structure, rattling panels and sending dust and debris into the air. The tapping stopped. Silence, heavy and expectant. My flashlight caught the outline of the figure across the gravel. Still fluid, still impossible. I tried to rationalize. A maintenance worker? An animal? A trick of light and shadow? None of it made sense. It moved against physics. It was aware of me. I realized with a chill that the wind, the turbines, and the shadow were all connected, orchestrated. I felt a pulse in my chest, synced with the low vibration in the ground. The world around me had become a signal, a frequency I was unwillingly tuned into. I needed to reach my truck. My legs moved, unsteady, like they belonged to someone else. Every step I took felt amplified. The shadow mirrored me, keeping distance but maintaining awareness. Tap, tap, tap. 12 beats. I reached the truck, slid in, locked the doors. My hands trembled as I tried the keys. The engine roared to life. Outside, the shadow lingered for a moment, watching, before retreating into the darkness between turbines. Tap, tap, tap. I drove slowly toward the main road, scanning the ridge. 36 turbines, each blinking red, a sea of eyes in the night. The tapping faded, then returned, now from multiple directions, impossible to pinpoint. I forced myself to focus on the road. Each mile felt longer than the last. I reached the highway and finally felt distance from the farm. Tap, tap, tap. The rhythm, now only in my mind. I stopped at a rest area, shaking. My phone had no signal. The word system override haunted me. I called the dispatch again. Finally, a human voice. Coldridge, are you okay? Relief washed over me. I don't know, I said. I tried to explain. The tapping, the shadows, the turbine awareness. The dispatcher hesitated. We'll send a team, they said. But it's a long night. I sat in the truck, shaking, flashlight in hand, staring at the dark horizon. The wind carried the hum of the turbines. The tapping replayed in my ears. I knew I hadn't imagined it. Not entirely. The turbines, the shadow, the rhythm, they had marked me, embedded in memory, impossible to erase. I considered returning with the team in daylight, rationalizing, analyzing, and documenting everything. The shadow, the code, the taps, they belonged to another layer of reality, one I had glimpsed, one I could not forget. Hours passed. The farm receded behind me, but the presence lingered. In the coffee shop near town, I met another technician who had worked the night shift at a different isolated wind farm. I asked if he ever experienced anything unusual. He smirked. You're alone out there, you know. Shadows play tricks. Machines hum differently at night. I pressed further. Did you ever hear tapping? His smirk faltered. He looked around, lowered his voice. Sometimes. 3 knocks, then a pause, then more. Never followed anyone, though? Not like you. I left quickly, unsettled. The tapping returned in my thoughts, rhythm now encoded in memory. Sleep evaded me. The farm's shadow had imprinted a warning, a message, an awareness. I realized that no matter the distance, no matter the hours, the wind and turbines could reach me in mind. They were patient, and the shadow would return. Morning came reluctantly, pale and cold, brushing the horizon with weak light. I drove back toward the wind farm with a mix of dread and resolve, the road stretching like a ribbon of unease before me. Each turbine loomed taller than I remembered, spinning slowly, indifferent, yet somehow sentient. The wind had softened, but the low-frequency hum lingered, vibrating through the truck as if carrying a memory of the night before. I parked at the base of Turbine 12, flashlight in hand, heart pounding in sync with the faint pulse I could still feel beneath my feet. The team had arrived, 3 other technicians, and a local sheriff who had been skeptical until he'd seen my shaken face. I briefed them quickly, omitting nothing, leaving out only my own disbelief and the exact shapes I'd glimpsed. The shadow, I explained, was real. The tapping, the rhythm, it was more than coincidence. We suited up and approached the turbine together. The gravel crunched underfoot, a harsh reminder that I was back in the place where reason faltered. The nacelle's interior smelled of oil and metal, as it had the night before, but this time, the fear was shared. I led the team up the ladder, marking each step with tape and chalk, ensuring we had a clear path out. The turbine groaned as if alive, responding to our presence. Then we heard it, a faint, deliberate tap, echoing from above. I froze. The others looked at me, confusion flickering in their eyes. Tap, tap, tap. It was faint but unmistakable. A message, an acknowledgement, or a warning. We advanced cautiously. The shadow didn't appear immediately. It was patient, watching from the edges of the nacelle, unseen but sensed. Each of us moved in unison, flashlight beams sweeping the space, cutting through the darkness in crisscross patterns. Then, a flicker in the corner, a shape too fluid, too fast, vanishing as soon as it was caught in the light. We followed the path I had memorized, markings guiding us like breadcrumbs through the unnatural geometry. Tap, tap, tap. Closer now, synchronized with the vibration in the turbine's body. We reached the control panel. The screens flickered again, system override, but this time, they stabilized long enough for us to regain SCADA control. Alarms blared briefly, then fell silent. The turbines seemed to exhale, the hum softening as if appeased. We searched the tower, finding nothing but displaced dust and a lingering chill in the air. Outside, the wind carried a faint echo of tapping, fading as we descended. The team exchanged glances, hesitant, uncertain, yet relieved. I knew, however, that the wind farm had marked me. The shadow, the rhythm, the intelligence in the turbines, they existed beyond what any of us could fully comprehend. Daylight revealed the ordinary: gravel paths, rusted metal, turbines spinning gracefully. But the memory of the night, the sense of being observed and tested, would remain. I left the wind farm that day with a new understanding. These isolated structures were not merely machines harnessing wind. They were nodes, conduits of something larger, something aware. As I drove away, the sunlight glinting off the blades, I realized the shadow would wait, patient, until the next night, the next solo shift, the next soul foolish enough to wander too far alone.